This channel is dedicated to reporting various true crime, paranormal, and other strange cases from Australia. I would like to make my usual disclaimer that I mean no disrespect to anyone talked about in this video. This video is intended for educational purposes. I would also like to add a warning that this video contains discussions regarding drug use and physical and mental abuse. This is the strange and bizarre case of the family, an Australian religious New Age cult that was formed in the mid-1960s in Melbourne. It was also known as the Great White Brotherhood. The family consisted of several adults, aka aunties and uncles, and several children. The leader, or the mother, of the group was Anne Hamilton-Byrne, a yoga teacher by trade.
For more than 30 years, this is the only glimpse the world has had of Australia's most secretive cult leader, Anne Hamilton-Byrne.
Look! Before I tell you more about the family, first we will talk a little bit about Anne Hamilton-Byrne, her background, and how she came to be the leader of the family. Anne Hamilton-Byrne, birth name Evelyn Grace Victoria Edwards, was born on the 30th of December 1921 in Sale, Victoria. Evelyn grew up in poverty-stricken conditions with mostly absent parents. She was the oldest of 7 children. Her father fought in World War I, and her mother was diagnosed and hospitalised with severe schizophrenia. From the age of 8, she spent time at the Old Melbourne Orphanage and attended Sunshine Primary School. In 1941, at 20 years old, she changed her name to Anne Hamilton and married her first husband, Lionel Harris. They had one biological child together before Lionel was killed in a car accident in 1955. 10 years later, in 1965, Anne remarried. This was a brief marriage, ending in divorce after only 1 year. But this marriage would be the driving force into the early stages of the family. Anne's husband worked as a gardener at Melbourne University and had introduced her to the headmaster of the Queen's College within Melbourne Uni, Dr. Raina Johnson, a physicist, parapsychologist, author, and mystic. Dr. Johnson wrote several books on mysticism, combining beliefs from several different religions, but mainly focusing on the beliefs of Christianity and Hinduism.
A typical Edwardian English gentleman. He was interested in everything, always very gentle to others. He looked like the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland.
He studied and taught mysticism in India in the early 1960s, before bringing his teachings back to Melbourne, where he met Anne Hamilton-Byrne. The two of them were extremely compatible in the ways of their beliefs, specifically the philosophy of Imaginism, which explains the purpose of God and human life. By this stage, Anne was referring to herself as a reincarnation of Jesus Christ.
Raina kept a sort of diary in which he described Anne Hamilton-Byrne as Jesus for the mid-20th century.
Anne and Dr. Johnson started to hold regular meetings at his property in Ferny Creek, in the Dandenong Ranges just outside Melbourne. He called the property Santiniketan, which means abode of peace. Anne would lead these meetings where they discussed religion and philosophy. The group consisted of highly regarded adults in their respective industries.
Anne's followers included dozens of respected middle-class professionals, doctors, nurses, lawyers, teachers, all willing to do the bidding of their master.
Dr. Johnson, who referred them to Anne's yoga classes, recruited most of these people. The exact number of people in the cult isn't known, but it is believed to have included up to 500 people at one point. The two of them then purchased an adjoining property, which they named Santiniketan Park, in 1968, as well as several other properties in the area where they will hold their meetings. But the most important property was the one where Anne and her husband lived, with up to 28 illegitimate children. Anne and members of the family would falsify adoption papers and manipulate young adult and teenage mothers to give up their newborns to be part of the sect.
Some of her 500 disciples helped convince mothers to adopt them out. They thought the kids were going to a good home. The reality was far from it.
The children were brought up to believe that Anne and Bill were their legitimate parents. The two of them would even go as far as to bleach the children's hair, dress them all in the same clothing to create the illusion that they were all brothers and sisters.
And to convince outsiders they were all related, Anne dyed their hair blonde.
Bleached hair, blonde, singing like the Von Trapp family, living out Anne's fantasy of, in her thoughts, I'm sure it was something like an Aryan race.
One of the children of the sect, Sarah Moore, spent most of her free life fighting back. Sarah, all the children, and even members of the family would take LSD. Not only would they give the children LSD, they would lock them in dark rooms alone for days while under the influence, and given the drug repeatedly. The aunties would tell them to work on themselves and convince them that they wanted to be abused. They were also visited by Anne, who would put on a show of sorts, convincing the children that she in fact is Jesus Christ. The lead investigator of this case, Lex DeMann, had been pursuing the cult for several years. He told 60 Minutes that members of the sect truly believed Anne was a reincarnation of Jesus Christ.
Of all the crimes that I investigated, she is the most evil person that I've ever met.
Lex DeMann was the Victorian detective who, for years, pursued the cult.
These people truly believe that she is Jesus Christ.
The house where they all lived was right by a lake, where thousands of people would come every summer, and nobody thought there was anything suspicious about their situation. There were rumours that the property were holding children against their will, and in 1985, a reporter named Mary Moore decided to investigate the claims herself.
Keep a lot of children in the commune here, is that right?
No, that's not right at all.
There's no children here?
No.
But Mary Moore's suspicions were ignored and the abuse continued.
Anne denied that there were any children on the property at all. One day, police did show up at their door. The aunties immediately began to hide all the children.
I'll show you where we were hidden.
Sarah showed me the house at Lake Eildon and the secret tunnel where they were forced to hide when visitors called.
There's a little hole, which was...
Through here?
Yeah, thing that covered it, little picture sort of thing. Oh, it's got a little piece of cloth now. And we'd all pile through here.
Through that hole?
Yeah.
28 of you in there?
Up to 28, yeah.
That is disgusting. That is abhorrent abuse.
As well as being drugged, the children were also abused. They would be beaten for things such as wetting the bed. They would receive water torture.
And then there was the most terrifying ordeal of all.
They put a bucket here, and then one of the aunties would help, and then you'd have to kneel down, and then they'd push your head into the bucket and hold it for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, then bring it out again and say, did you do it, did you do it? Say, no. Back in again.
Water torture?
Yeah. Because Anne had said better to be drowned than a liar, basically.
Better to be drowned
than be a liar.
Anne, of course, denies these claims. Unfortunately, several of the children, although freed, couldn't bear the pain from their upbringing and were killed as a result of this. All of the others also suffered deep psychological problems because of this. Sarah was kicked out of the cult in her late teens as she began to develop some independence, and Sarah's sister, Leanne Crease, had escaped the cult. The two of them banded together and tipped the police off to everything going on in the family. When Anne was under investigation, her and her husband fled Australia to one of Anne's New York properties, where she hid away until 1993, when she was caught and extradited back to Melbourne. One of the most irritating and puzzling things about this case is that Anne was only charged with falsifying birth certificates of just 3 children, including Sarah's, and fined only $5,000. Anne passed away in a nursing home in Melbourne on the 13th of June 2019 at 98 years old. Up until her death, she always denied having abused any children, continued to lie about how many children she acquired illegally, and never apologised for what she did. A documentary called The Family was released in 2016 at the Melbourne International Film Festival. It shares all of the details of what went on during that time and the effects of the abuse at the hands of Anne Hamilton-Byrne. If you enjoyed this video and want to know more about this case, I highly recommend watching this documentary. I've linked it in the description. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and if you have any Australian case suggestions, old or recent, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
To thy last supper, let me allow to stay, O Son of God, for neither have I betrayed any secrets to thine enemies, nor have I given thee the kiss of Judas.